Throughout law school, whenever we were talking about the European Union's history, we were told that it started as a trade agreement between European nations, and the Eurosceptics were really afraid that it was moving towards becoming a federal state. The reason people in Europe are against a European federal state is because, unlike America, where people have the same culture and they have the same goals, people in Europe don't really have this connection. Not only are there a lot of historical grievances between nations because of World War One, World War Two, and even before that, but even if you could move away past these grievances, the reality is that people in Greece really don't care about what's happening to the people in Germany. People in Hungary really don't care about what is happening to the people in Britain. There is no European spirit, if you will. Individual nations care about themselves, and maybe they care about some allies that they had in the past, but it's next to impossible to get people to stop thinking themselves as Italian, Greeks, British, and make them think as Europeans. Now, of course, alliances can be made, and of course, we can have certain freedoms for people to move from one border to the other without the need of a passport and just using their ID. Maybe the same currency can also be had. But to try to push for a United States of Europe is not something that the people of Europe are going to want. It's not something that I foresee people will vote on. Maybe the people in Germany and maybe the people in France will vote for a United States of Europe. However, I honestly doubt that in Southern and Eastern Europe, if people are going to be asked to have this vote, it's going to turn up positive. Which is why the only way you could have a United States of Europe is by forcing it. Another reason why I'm really against the United States of Europe is because the way the federal state of Europe is going to function, the way democracy is going to be represented, is more akin to the Soviet Union than to the United States. This is something that I need to discuss in another video and to show you the similarities between the way the European Union is being governed to the USSR and how different it is than people in the United States do things. And this seems to be something that most Europhiles tend to ignore. They really don't care that their sovereignty is taken away. In fact, they don't really care about democracy much at all. Most Europhiles view the people as being dumb, as being not smart and not adequate in making the important decisions for the future, while the EU bureaucrats know what's best. They're almost like they've been grown into it since children, into understanding world geopolitics. And when they say something, then clearly they must know better. At least this is the opinion that most people that I talk with that favor the EU and defend the fact that in European Union people don't really get much say in how things happen. And what I find interesting is the idea of Brexit. Every single time I read about Brexit, it's what Britain did in order to piss off the EU and how Britain is going to suffer and how it's Britain's fault and how they're going to now face economical burdens and they're going to be ostracized by the rest of the EU. No one is actually putting the other question: how is the EU going to deal with Britain leaving? Because as we know, Britain was the second payer to the European Union, meaning that other states are now going to have to take the burden. And as we also know, trading is a two-way street. I mean, only yesterday in my video, I pointed out how a German foreign minister is saying that the sanctions they imposed on Russia is hurting Germany because they needed that energy coming from Russia. And when you impose economic sanctions, when you refuse to trade with a nation, you're also hurting yourself. This is not something that you want to desire. And a nation like Britain has a lot of trade to offer because it's an island nation, obviously having access to oceans, can have more commerce with more countries. And thus it's not feasible to just want to stop trading with them permanently. So why am I bringing this up? The reason I'm bringing this up is that it seems that the people from the European Union are not at all concerned with the reason why the United Kingdom left. They don't even want to have, I guess, a look inside and see, okay, what did we do to cause Britain to leave in order to prevent other states from leaving? And they're not doing this. Instead, they're doubling down. Now, it seems that the man who could be vice chancellor within 2 weeks, and he is in a coalition with Merkel. He's the leader of SPD. He is asking for the United States of Europe by 2025. Now, notice how he thinks that Germany can do this, and I think the reason he thinks that Germany can do this is because they can. One of the reasons that we're constantly told is like, why is Germany having so much power in the EU? And it's, well, because they pay for everything, right? They pay for everything, so they should have the right to do whatever the fuck they please, goddammit. And I don't think that this is how democracy should work. It's not the person that has the biggest wallet that gets to decide how things should be going in your backyard. It's as ridiculous as to say that just because a neighbor is giving you cash, he has the right to decide what goes on in your home. I mean, this is mind-baffling, right? Because they're not giving this money out of charity. They're not giving this money because they're nice people. It seems that they're giving this money in exchange for sovereignty. And anyone who knows anything about democracy and anyone who studied law understands that sovereignty is not for sale. You can't just buy off countries like this, right? But apparently with the EU you can. If you look at Romania's constitution, for instance, and I wonder if other European nations have the same in the constitution, EU law takes precedent over internal law. So basically, when the Romanian president says we don't want to take more refugees because Romania's economy can't handle more refugees, it's not that we can't house them, it's that Romania can't integrate them, can't afford to have them here. And then the next day Merkel says, no, refugees quotas. Then the Romanian president does a 180 and talks about how many refugees we're going to get. And this is just one example. If this is the case with a problem like refugees, why do you think it would be different when it comes to taxations? Why do you think it would be different? Like, for instance, let's say the Romanian parliament would say, yeah, we're not going to allow supermarkets in towns anymore. They're going to have to be at the edge of town because Romanian businesses are suffering. They're not making loyal competition against them. And it's not fair to ask, just the local baker to be able to compete with Kaufland. If you do something like this, the EU would immediately step in and say, no, you're not allowed, right? So these are just examples why I'm against these people, because I didn't vote for Angela Merkel. I didn't vote for the leader of the German SPD. In fact, I don't even know who the guy is. Do you understand this, right? Why would it be okay for this man, who I've never seen in my entire life up till today, be able to decide what goes on in my country? And I guarantee he probably doesn't even know who the members of my parliament are. It is bizarre, and that fact that people are cherishing this and they're like, yes, this is something good. We definitely need to go for it. Whatever the EU wants is what the EU gets. And this is the mentality that really bothers me, right? Because here's the thing. I want people to understand this. I wouldn't be against, let's say, if I realize that we're having the conversation and the overwhelming amount of people are against me. And I'll be, fine. If the overwhelming amount of people don't want me to have my say, then that's okay. At least we had the conversation. But you're not even going to get the conversation. You're not going to get articles in the newspapers that talk about the pros and the cons of having United States of Europe. You're not going to have, on news media coming with a person that says, no, I'm against the United States of Europe and here's why. Even the conversation itself is something that's taboo. It's something that we shouldn't really talk about. We should just let it happen. Whatever the EU wants is what the EU gets. And this is like the mentality that really pisses me off. So basically, the person that's against making the European Union, to a lot of people's surprise, but not mine, is Angela Merkel. She's actually against Mr. Schulz. So basically, she's saying that, no, we're not going to make a United States of Europe. And the reason she is giving, right, is that right now they want to focus on the EU army. So the EU army first, United Europe maybe after. Which is just chilling because again it plays into my into my phobias, if you will, that the EU army can then be used to just keep member states in line. Because if it becomes like just think about it, right? If it stops being an alliance of nations and it turns into a federal state, then whenever, let's say, Greece would want to secede from the European Union, it would be a civil war. It wouldn't be perceived as like a war between nations on the international scale. It would just be like an internal affair. You could then just send your army and have like a civil war and say, no, these are the separatists, they're the bad guys, we need to get them back in line. Please tell me why you don't think this would be possible. Just what is the reason and the rationale, given on how things went up till now, that you will say, no, this will never happen? Because X, Y, and Z. I think X, Y, and Z needs to be like pretty strong reasons for me to believe that, yeah, this is never going to happen. This is not the thing that can exist. And listen to this, right? According to what Mr. Schulz wants, he wants that Brussels to have the power over individual member states' foreign and domestic policy, as well as taxes. So at this point, it really doesn't matter who I vote for in Romania. Like, honestly, just there's no reason for me to even put a stamp on anyone. If they have the power to decide what taxes we're going to have here, if they have the power to decide how our foreign and domestic policy is going to be like, there's really no point in me even electing leaders in Romania. It's just astonishing. And not to mention, it's like, why does anyone think that Brussels knows what's better for Romania? Do they live here? Do they even know the political parties that are here? Maybe they do, right? But do they know the grievance of the people? And the question is, do they even care about the grievance of the people? Does Mr. Schulz care if Romania starts, going bankrupt? If Greece goes bankrupt, do you think Mr. Schulz care about the riots on the streets of Greece? Please let me be skeptical when it comes to this shit, because I'm really interested. Right now, here's the thing. The politicians in Greece do care about the riots in Greece, because at least they understand that it's going to affect their image and it's going to affect the next elections, right? So eventually they might actually be either taken down or they might suffer consequences, which is why the government does cave into riots occasionally, because they don't want things to escalate. It's still their country, right? But when it comes to Mr. Schulz, do you think he gives a shit about Greece? Do you think he really cares? It's like, yeah, there's riots in Greece. Let them handle it. Now, I want you to think about the biggest reason why I'm against the idea of the United States for Europe, ruled by Brussels. Right now, in Germany, Angela Merkel and her party are in power, right? However, we notice that the AFD is starting to gain more and more ground. Imagine that by 2025 is not going to be their United Europe, and maybe some nationalist German parties are going to get in charge, and now they're going to have access to the lovely army that they've created, and they're going to have the ability to declare domestic and foreign policy within the European Union. So two things can happen then. Either the European Union is going to turn into a dictatorship and they're going to just go against anyone else, because I don't think they created this lovely ring of power so that they can allow other people to wield. Or it's going to remain democratic, and then the AFD and other, nationalist parties that we're seeing are gaining more and more ground recently are going to take over. Either way is not a really good idea and a good decision. So these things are never discussed. Do you see any article on any press other than my own even raising the question? I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying that there is a possibility for it to happen, and I don't see a single system in place trying to prevent this from happening.